Welcome to another true gaming topic where we take a deep dive into the entire gaming experience. And today, guys, we're going to be having a look and analyzing a pivotal gameplay mechanic: morality and player choice. Now, there are a number of games that come to mind, and particularly a genre that stands out and makes this an important part of its entire gameplay makeup. You've guessed it, but I am talking about RPG, role-playing games. These are the type of games that essentially popularized having important and pivotal player choice in regards to the gameplay experience, story, and, the entire experience as a whole. This is another part of why gaming is so special, because not only are you restricted to one storyline as general TV shows and movies do, you essentially have to stay within the path that's given to you, and what pushes you is your curiosity. But what makes gaming special, once again, is your ability to be able to change the narrative and gameplay experience in a way that you see fits, and you'll suffer the various consequences that come to that and come your way, essentially. Now, there are a number of games that have tackled morality and player choice, and I definitely do enjoy them. Ones that really carry it and push it forward strongly are games such as Fallout, these Bethesda games, Skyrim, telltalegames, which are essentially story-driven games, which are kind of like a movie type experience, but they give you the interactivity to be able to direct the story in a way that you like to see happen. But as I've said, RPGs are definitely the ones that push this systematic approach to storytelling forward, and they're definitely the leaders and the flagships that push this entire style to new heights. Now, I definitely won't be the first person to point this out, but the way that the morality system is executed in a number of gaming titles is honestly not that great. Unfortunately, too many games tend to go in one specific way, black or white. Either you make a decision that is inherently good, or you make a decision that is inherently bad. And you end up knowing, or it's very clear what the consequences for that decision are going to be. Of course, if you think of the basic system that's executed in the Infamous series, if you've played all the Infamous games, you know that the morale and the choices that you make are pivotal to the entire narrative experience. While the cutscenes and things and the overall plot doesn't change that much, the way people see you and the overall tone of the game changes depending on which path you choose to take. And of course, if you want to feel good about yourself, and the story path that's honestly just the most enjoyable is generally always the good path. The evil path, it tends to be a little bit more depressing, honestly just not that great. But I'd say the main issue that I want to point out here is that lots of games give us choices, but unfortunately they aren't very substantial, firstly, and on top of that, they aren't exactly true to real life. Let me explain. Now, in terms of Infamous, the choices are very clear, basic, but honestly end up not being that interesting, as it's either good or bad. But as we know in life, there is always a moral gray. There are things that are done that are good. Sometimes you have to choose the lesser good or the lesser evil, depending on the choice and thing that you have to face that's in front of you. And games tackle these things in multiple ways. If we consider games such as the Bethesda games, such as a Skyrim or a Fallout, there are multiple ways in which you can deal with the problems. Usually there is an evil choice, and usually there is a good choice. But unfortunately, they tend to be bare bones. In terms of if you want to do the evil choice or do the shorter choice, it's usually one of two parts. If you want to take the good route, it's usually going to take you longer, and it's going to be probably a lot more difficult, but you will reap more rewards. Now, in terms of the bad choice, usually it ends with you killing the person who's given you the quest, or doing more killing and essentially quickening up and making the entire process faster. You essentially do something heinous, really, very heinous crime for you to solve the issue very quickly, but unfortunately at the end of the day you end up with less content. This is honestly the issue that we're facing in a number of games. Either it's the infamous style that we're very used to seeing, where one side is good, other side is evil, and it's very clear, it's clear cut, everything is very clear and understandable, but honestly it ends up being dry, as you're either doing the good thing or you are doing the bad thing. Or you have the other option where you do have the option and it's a little bit deeper, so I give credit where credit is due, it's a little bit deeper and you have more choice, but unfortunately if you go for the evil option, the content seems to be reduced, as instead of you going on a quest, and most of the time a pretty interesting quest, on you taking the good route, it ends up you essentially just getting into a fight with the quest givers or whoever is involved with it, and just taking them out and taking whatever remains and whatever item you were sent to retrieve. So those are the options that we usually see in gaming. That's a number of the issues that we face. Now, here's something that is interesting. There is a game series that has been able to innovate and kind of twist this in their own specific way, and I think it's very, very interesting. While I do give credit where credit is due, they definitely did something innovative and they definitely deserve all the praise. I definitely still think the system that they implemented is flawed. Let's get into it. The game series, you probably well do know about it, but it is produced and developed by Arcane Studios, also under the umbrella of Bethesda. But I'm talking about the well-known Dishonored series. Now, they've come up with a number of game titles that have definitely hit the mark very, very well. Dishonored 1, Dishonored 2, Dishonored Death of the Outsider. These are the main 3 titles that are available for you to go out and purchase. If you haven't yet played these games, I definitely would recommend that you do so. Just to note, the tone of the games is definitely on the darker, eerie and creepier side. So if you're someone who's looking for a more of a light-hearted, fun experience, this is not going to be that. It's definitely a grungy and dark experience, but it's definitely cool as they give you a number of options for you to play, and I'm going to go a little bit deeper into that, and I'll explain why the gameplay experience and the options you have are directly linked to the morality. Now, in Dishonored, there are a number of ways in which you can complete your missions, you can defeat your targets and essentially complete the game. You have one of 2 options, and they do something very, very different. Now, in most games, you have a combat system and you defeat your enemies and you complete the task, and usually you will have an objective or a choice at perhaps the end of the quest or at the end of the story where you choose to do something right or wrong. Dishonored completely flips that, and they make every single decision that you make pivotal to the overall end of the story. You have an option whether to go lethal or non-lethal. Now, if you choose to go guns blazing and attack your enemies using swords, using weapons, using the multiple powers that you are bestowed, you will definitely have a fun experience, but you're going to suffer the consequences of your actions. As the world becomes darker, the tone becomes darker, the characters around you react positively or negatively to your actions. So if you are violent in your approach, they're going to be, how do I put it, not happy with the way you deal with the situation, and your interactions with them will also not be positive. There'll be a negative as a result of the actions you choose to take. Now, of course, that's not the only option. You have the option to go non-lethally. You can choose to not kill any of the assailants that have come for you. You can choose to non-lethally use sleeping darts, stun grenades, stun mines, and use the multiple tools that are given to you so you can non-lethally and essentially knock out your enemies and complete the story at the same time. Now, this is very pivotal, as essentially the ending and the fates of many characters is directly tied to the decisions that you make. So I think this is a very interesting and innovative way of implementing morality into storytelling games. No longer are you given the simple black and white choices. Every single decision that you make is working towards a positive or negative ending. While I definitely need to give credit, and this is a great innovation on a style that's a game mechanic and game system that is honestly quite dry and outdated, this is a great and interesting spin on it. But there's something I want to tackle and consider and I want you guys to think about when you're talking about morality. A common saying is that or statement is that, if you're good and you're good to good people, you're going to benefit and reap the benefits of that. And karma is finally going to come for you. If you do good things will happen to you. If you do bad things will happen to you. But there's something really interesting about that, is that that's truly not how life works. Bad people can continue to do bad things, and they may never see the day where they actually get punished. And that's the case for a lot of people. A lot of people do a lot of good things, but they never do truly end up getting rewarded for that. Now, of course, this is a complex statement and thing that I'm saying, and you're probably wondering, hey, how can this even be implemented into a video game experience? Now, I want to try and implement what I'm saying over here into the Dishonored series and implement it into the way that they essentially use and operate in terms of their morality system. Now, in this system, as I've mentioned before, if you attack and kill a lot of people, you're going to suffer the consequences, and the effects of the world are going to be negative. Now, I propose that we switch it up and tweak it a wee bit so it mirrors the real world a little bit more. Now, this is a statement that I'll use, and I hope this will be able to convey what I'm trying to say. Perception is reality. Your image is an extremely important part of the entire human experience. The way people view you is important, and while it is saying don't judge a book by its cover, that's exactly how the world honestly works, and it's understandable. It's a survival mechanic. Identify a threat and move accordingly. And that's essentially how I want to implement this into gaming. Now, Dishonored punishes you if you kill enemies or defeat enemies in your pursuit of saving Dunwall. Now, what I propose, and I think a system that would be much better, is to use the very extensive stealth mechanic to be able to twist and bend the essential morality system that they've implemented over here. What I say is that if the main character that you play as in the game, Corvo, is caught or seen or detected killing somebody, that is when you should be punished in terms of your chaos, and that is what should lead to you experiencing a much more sinister ending, in a sense. I say this because if you're able to, for example, complete a level while being completely undetected, no one is going to know that you were there. No one is going to know who the assailant was or who the murderer was. You use your mystique, manipulation to cater a reality or perception of you that you want the world to see. And I think this is a very cool and interesting way of implementing it in this game, Dishonored, and a lot of others, because it's honestly true to reality. In the world that we live in today, there are many liars, and people are able to use lies, deception, and manipulation to give themselves a public image that looks favorable to them. If you don't believe me, let me show you guys a celebrity example. This is completely unrelated, but perception is reality. Consider The Rock. He is a very, very successful former wrestler turned super mega star actor. Now I want to ask you guys a question, and I want you to think about this. What do you actually know about The Rock's personality? And I mean him as a person. He's been able, and his marketing team or his manager, whoever it is, has been able to create a sensational avatar or persona that The Rock is. We don't actually know what The Rock is thinking. We don't know his personality. We don't know his true thoughts or the things or the way he feels about multiple issues and things that he actually cares about. All we know about The Rock, when we think of The Rock, we think of big strong man, cool, funny, charismatic actor, gym, and cheat meals and cheat days. That's the immediate thing that comes to you when you think of The Rock. Solid actor, not gonna lie, he definitely is a hard worker, and that's a characteristic that we think of him, but we don't actually know who he is. He could honestly be an absolutely horrible human being, and we wouldn't even know. Perception is reality, and I think it would be very cool for us to be able to do that in video games. And I think it would be a great way for us to be able to innovate in terms of the morality system, and to make it more interesting and have more depth. if no one ever finds out about the bad things that you do, are they truly bad? So I think using things such as manipulation and deception would be a very, very cool thing to do, because as long as everyone thinks you're a good guy, that's all that really matters. And that's the problem in a lot of video games. If you do a bad thing or a bad act in a game such as Skyrim, or you do a bad thing or a bad act in Dishonored, you are duly punished for it. But the argument is that I can use is that, in Dishonored, I was completely stealthy in my approach. Nobody even knew I was there. I was a silent assassin, moving out with my crossbow, moving with my poison and real crossbow darts, and taking everybody out accordingly, and I was not at all detected. Why in the world does the world still react negatively to me if you don't know what I did? And I think things such as that can be very, very interesting and cool to do in order to make a narrative and plot very engaging and very interesting. If we consider this, we can use this tactic in a game such as other RPGs. Instead of just punishing the player for making a negative decision and having one negative path, let's have the ability where the player can still enjoy the fruits of choosing the positive path, but also doing slimy and negative things under the table. I think it would be a great way for us, for game developers, and honestly for the entire game experience, to improve with manipulation and deception, and essentially the gray area to be implemented into gamings. Now, of course, there are many other innovations and many other ideas that can be come up to improve morality in gaming, and hope we can have a discussion down there in the comments, and you guys come up with your own ideas and we can have a bit of a discussion. Maybe I'll make a sequel to this video considering how these various mechanics, ideas and styles can be implemented to make gaming honestly a whole lot better, because morality in gaming tends to be quite one-dimensional. I just think of the times in the Telltale games. Usually, if we think of the Telltale Walking Dead, usually the choice was to kill somebody or not to kill them, and that's very black and white. Now, of course, I'm not saying that these type of choices should absolutely be abandoned. Of course, no, they're very cool, and it's interesting for us to be fooled and for interesting things to happen, and for us to make a decision that is good or bad. I'm not saying completely abandon them, but let's add a little bit more variance. Let's use manipulation and deception in video games as well, not just in real life. Before we head on else, there's one more thing that I think would be cool and a little bit of a curveball that for players to deal with. One thing that I mentioned before is that good things don't always happen to good people, and this is what I want to say. Just because a player makes a good decision or the morally correct decision does not mean they should be rewarded at all, in a sense, for what they choose to do. Now, what games tend to do in this case is to essentially give a bittersweet end to everything. You can make a harsh decision or a good decision, and usually at the end of it, both decisions, whether you chose the one that seemed good or bad at the time, usually the ending is just bad overall, and it doesn't really matter what you chose. Now, I propose something slightly different be done. Confuse the player. Now, there's something about gaming that we may sometimes not think about, but the UI and gaming systems tend to be very reliable in terms of their operations. It's something that we can trust in, and making choices in morality is one of those things. If we make a decision that seems to be good, we're almost guaranteed and have no doubt in our mind that the outcome of that is going to be positive. Now, here's something I think that should be implemented, linking back to that statement of good things don't always happen to good people. Now, I think it would be cool to confuse the player at times. This needs to be used in discretion and not too much, as it'll become useless and not as impactful if it happens regularly. I say confuse the player. Make the player, or allow the player to choose a decision that seems good, morally correct, and is obviously going to have a positive result, but confuse them by actually having the consequence of that decision be very, very negative, and have some very negative effects on the people that are involved, the multiple NPCs, and perhaps even on the player. Because if you consider the infamous games, if you did the good decision, you're going to always have a good reward. Even if the plot was going in a negative way, way, the consequences of that action always tended to be good. So I think it's a very cool way. It definitely has to be used sparingly, because if it's done too much, people are going to expect it and they're going to, overthink and end up choosing the wrong decision intentionally. We don't want that. The best stories and best narratives tend to always be morally ambiguous and you never being sure which side you want to choose. Things that immediately come to mind are things such as in shows such as Game of Thrones and Attack on Titan. While one side seems to be good, other side isn't really that bad either, as either side has good motivations for the decisions that they are making. And such complexities definitely need to be implemented into the gaming sphere. And this is an extraordinary medium with so much interactivity and freedom that it truly would be a great waste if we didn't go deeper and looked to innovate in this very interesting sector. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. I definitely enjoyed making it, and considering all the games that I've played recently, and I've definitely been enjoying my gaming of late. And hopefully we can have a really interesting and constructive discussion down there in the comments. Leave your thoughts down there. Give me some recommendations as well. I'm definitely down to have a cool, interesting discussion down there in the comments. Hope you guys enjoy your day. Subscribe to the channel, man. I am Explicit Sage, and I definitely will be pumping out more content to you guys. Don't worry about it. More is on the way. Stay tuned.